All right, it's 6 o'clock. So I'll call the planning commission meeting to order. First, let's do the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Oh, we're going to start this way. Oh, there you go. Sound a little bit better. So, roll call. Carl Granzo present.
Mary Gray present.
Mark Crouch present.
Randy Thomas present.
Linnell Comstock present.
Great. Minutes. Has everybody had an opportunity to read the minutes?
Yes.
Do we need any discussion on them? Did anybody find any errors or omissions? Good to me. Okay, I move that we accept the minutes, approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good. Tonight we have quite a bit of work ahead of us. We have two code interpretation, one final partition, and a possibly fourth one, which is an extension to a conditional use permit. All right, just so everybody knows, the first four items aren't public comment. But after that, we got it. And providing how much time we have, we'll have them. All right, let's get started. The first one is a code interpretation. I will now open the public inquiry of a request for code interpretation on the question of whether the operation of a short-term rental is conditionally permitted in the recreational residential zone. The inquiry is beginning at, let's say, 6:02, Thursday, July 6, 2023. My name is Mark Crouch, Planning Commission Chair. I will preside over this inquiry. This inquiry about the interpretation of the current code with regard to specific use in a specific zoning district. It is not about whether that use is good or bad, or whether the current code should or should not be changed. That's a different avenue. The inquiry will be conducted as follows. The staff will first present the staff report identifying the applicable criterion and presenting the code interpretation of the staff. After the staff's presentation, I will ask whether any of the commissioners have any questions for the staff. I'd like to inform you of several things prior to the beginning of the hearing. The applicable substantive criterion that apply to the inquiry are contained in the written staff report and will be identified and discussed in the oral staff report. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the criterion or other criterion in the comprehensive plan or development code that apply to this inquiry. All right, will the staff present the staff report? That
Sure.
would be you, Bob.
Okay, so as background, there's a property owner with property in the recreational residential zone that's interested in obtaining a license to operate a short-term rental. So that requires a business license. And that is a form of lodging, and lodging is not permitted or conditionally permitted in the recreational residential zone. So then the next question is whether there's something that could be considered as substantively similar. And one of the conditionally permitted uses in that zone is a commercial enterprise related to permitted uses. And one of the permitted uses is a single family home. So you can make a connection that this would be a commercial enterprise related to that permitted use. And the property owner is requesting an interpretation from the Planning Commission as to whether that would be a conditionally permitted use there before they invest the resources in actually applying for a conditional use permit. And notice for this issue has been made as required for any public meeting. There hasn't been a public notice through a newspaper published ad or mailing to surrounding properties because this isn't a land use decision, and so that's not required. Findings for this issue, the Planning Commission has previously determined in considering the same issue for the general single family zone that operation of a short-term rental is a form of lodging. The zoning code lists permitted buildings and uses for the RR zone in subsection 101 and the conditionally list permitted uses in 102. And neither of those sections explicitly mentions lodging or any other use that's similar to lodging. However, as I mentioned earlier, a single family dwelling is a permitted use, and the code allows commercial enterprises related to permitted uses as a conditionally permitted use. And so if you treat the language like it's an equation, you can say, well, that commercial enterprise is related to the house, and so it fits into that. On the other hand, if you do follow that line of reasoning, you could come up with something that's potentially inconsistent with the purpose and intent of the zoning code. And so the example I dreamed up in my devious imagination was, suppose that somebody has a construction business. They have property in the residential recreational zone, or excuse me, recreational residential zone. There's a home on it. And so they, as a home occupation, they put an office for their construction business in the house. That's a permitted use. And then they decide, well, I'm going to have my construction equipment and my construction material storage out in the yard in the residential area. And that's a commercial use, but it's related to my permitted use of the home occupation. I don't think that's what you were after. So I'm unable to determine if the intent of the code is to allow any and all commercial enterprises in the RR zone. As history, the Planning Commission has issued only 2 conditional use permits ever for this conditionally permitted use in the RR zone. Both of those were in 1994 and both at an RV park. One was to allow associated commercial enterprises such as a store and a laundromat, and the other was to have an RV dealership inside an RV park. And while those were both in the residential zone, they weren't in residential areas. Okay, as far as interpreting this, that would be your job, Planning Commission, because section 004 of the zoning code, subsection A, says it's your duty to interpret the code and to do it in a way as to carry out its intent and purpose. And the intent of the code isn't actually stated anywhere, but the purpose is. Section 003A of the zoning code says the purpose is to encourage the most appropriate use of land in accordance with the comprehensive plan. And if we then go look at the comprehensive plan, Goal 8, recreational needs, includes support development of seasonal cabins with kitchen facilities as appropriate, which might fit this use. Goal 9, economic development, has encouraged private business and facilities that enhance tourism and recreation, including but not limited to, and then among the things it lists are lodging. Goal 10, housing, asks us to encourage a full range of housing types, locations, and densities through planning and zoning to meet the present and future needs of the residents of the city of Lakeside. And this isn't really supportive of the use. It's the opposite, because a short-term rental reduces your housing stocks. But then on the other hand, housing says provide options for seasonal, recreational, residential living. So you kind of have it both ways under goal 10. Subsection 3B, the purpose of the code is to conserve and stabilize the value of property, and short-term rentals have a mixed effect on property value. Values go up near tourist destinations, and they tend to go down in areas where there isn't investor pressure to purchase and operate residential properties as short-term rentals. Subsection 3J says part of the purpose is to provide adequate space for recreational opportunity. And expanding lodging options does increase tourist access to local residential opportunity, but I'm not sure if that's what's meant by providing space, or whether providing space means that you zone land in a way that makes it available for recreation. I'm not sure what was meant by that. Subsection 3L, provide adequate space for housing, and conversion of dwelling into lodging reduces available housing stocks. But I don't know if housing stocks constitute space for housing. Again, that might be zoning. And that's up for you to decide. Staff recommendations. My recommendation is that the Planning Commission decide whether operating a short-term rental within a single-family dwelling in the RR zone is a conditionally permitted use. And it's Code Section 004 requires you to make that determination. And I'm not offering any recommendation as to how you should decide that.
Okay.
And your options are either to issue a finding that this is a conditionally permitted use, to issue a finding that it is not, or to table the issue if there's some specific information or evidence that you need on the question. Now I'm done.
Okay.
Thanks.
And questions for Rob? Does anybody have them? I do. Of course I do. Always do. The definition of related use. So I am going to give you an example, and tell me if I'm incorrect with that. That would be something like you had mentioned earlier with the RV park. An RV park that would offer an Airbnb. Would that be a good example of related use?
I don't know how operating a short-term rental is related to an RV park.
If it was part of the RV park, that would be an additional.
So you're saying somebody
An RV park basically handles temporary people.
Right. So I guess you're imagining an RV park that has a single family dwelling on it. And then
Or
somebody,
not even a single family, just simply that's their business, is to lodge people for short term, even though they're bringing in their vehicle.
For instance, Osprey Point, and there's small kind of homes that they rent. That's an
Right.
Airbnb, same thing.
yeah, technically what they're doing there is they have park models, which are recreational vehicles. And so people are coming in and they're staying in a recreational vehicle in an RV park, but they're not bringing their RV. It's provided.
Okay. So it sounds like we have to make the leap between a single family residence and a Airbnb would be it. If somebody is living there, they can have a short-term rental? Is that
Well,
what you're
well, that's
saying?
the question. Right?
Yeah, that's what that is the question then. If
Yeah.
somebody's actually living there, can they also have an Airbnb? You're not asking, can they just have an Airbnb flat out?
Well, it's just a single family dwelling. I don't know if they have to live there.
Well, because that's the permitted use.
Oh, I see.
To actually just have an
So-
Airbnb would be
So
not
your,
part of it.
so the conditionally permitted use is to have a commercial enterprise associated with a permitted use.
Right.
And you're suggesting that the single family dwelling is not a permitted use, it's a permitted building.
No, the single family dwelling is permitted, therefore, we're making the leap that if it's a single family unit, then lodging is a related use.
I'm really not following you.
Okay. So,
I think he's saying that if you have a single family house in the residential
Right.
area or in the recreational area, and somebody's living there, okay, in that house as a resident, if they take part of that house and make it into an Airbnb.
right, or they have something else on the same area
Yeah,
or in
Separate.
the same area that they're also doing an Airbnb. Because my concern is just to say, oh, all things are Airbnb is not meeting the definition of related enterprise to a use because we don't know what the use is. For example, if you're gonna do it related to the enterprise, you have to have a use originally.
Okay, the enterprise is operating a short-term rental. The permitted building or use is the single family dwelling.
But that would have to be done by the same.
I think he's being analytical with the word use.
I asked him that and he said no, so I really don't understand.
So my understanding of related enterprise use is, let's go to something aside from our present situation. Somebody owns a farm. They have a farm stand. That's a related use to the permitted use. And it's all within the same individual. But you're saying you're interpreting this, or from what you're bringing up here, what you're bringing up is, well, this would be possible if it's just one of the uses out there, so everybody can use the same use.
Yeah, I'm not understanding your question.
Okay. Does the property owner have to have a permitted use first before they can have a related use?
I believe that would be the case.
Okay. That's what I was getting at. So they have to be whatever to be able to do that, which is why we came up with the RV parks and allowing that use, because an RV park by itself is a pretty boring operation. You know, you're just bringing in your RVs, you're leaving it there. But when you turn it into an RV park, oh, you could have a general store. You can have this, you can have that, and you've expanded this use, and that's perfectly legal by what we put in the code to, you know, it's all related to the RV park.
Sure, but that section of code does allow an RV park as a permitted use.
Right.
But it doesn't say under conditionally permitted uses, commercial enterprise related to an RV park. It's commercial enterprise relating to any permitted use.
So it's any permitted.
It's any permitted use in the zone.
I gotta hang up on what was said earlier about Osprey Point with the homes that are there to display and people renting them out. That's short-term rental.
It would be if they were houses.
What's the difference between a house and an RV?
A park model is an RV.
Yeah, I mean.
A house is a single family dwelling that's either stick built or a manufactured home.
Those are stick. They're not on wings.
They have axles on them.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're. Plus, it's a different situation with those anyways, because it's a PUD.
No, you're thinking of something different.
Okay,
That's still short-term rental.
It is.
so. Any other questions, if anything? But you're basically saying if there's a use out there and we can relate it back to that use, no matter if it's the same owner or not. That's
No matter if it's the same owner or not.
correct.
I don't know where you're going with that.
Like my example before is simply a person owns a farm, right? The farm is now got a related use of a store,
Yeah, so
same owner.
you're
saying-
talking about a commercial enterprise taking place on a lot of property. And on the same lot, there is some other permitted use. And the commercial enterprise is related to that permitted use. This is all on one lot. So there can't be different owners between the two uses.
Correct. You're saying that's not what this is. What this is actually, if it's allowed, and if you can relate it to that allowed use, no matter who the owner is, or, it doesn't matter, ownership doesn't matter.
It's not even a question because there's one owner or owners of a single piece of property upon which there may be multiple uses, multiple buildings or uses.
Okay, but we were talking about the full zone.
Yeah,
So it's still one owner on one lot.
this is all one lot.
Okay.
So one lot is the site of the conditionally permitted commercial enterprise related to the permitted use that's on the same lot. It's one
That's
lot.
Clearly, it's turned off.
That's what I was getting at. Okay.
Isn't this the same thing, Rob, as what we've been trying to work on with the tiny homes, additional housing? Wouldn't it fall under
No,
that?
that's a different situation. But that would be a good use of it.
Well, it seems like it's the same thing. If you've got the room on your lot, you can put a tiny home there.
Right.
For additional,
Okay.
what's the difference between that and this?
The difference is that one, you're living in that house and you're putting an auxiliary unit next to it.
That's what this,
Yeah.
No, this person owns this house. He doesn't live in it. He's going to rent it out. For
Oh.
short term.
it doesn't live on the property.
He doesn't live on the property.
Okay,
That's exactly right.
okay, I just, that's clear now. Okay. Don't
So
know
he
if you don't
doesn't live
answer.
on the property, just renting it out short term?
Term, yeah.
Well, if you're renting the home out or short-term occupancy while you're renting it out, you're not living there.
Or you have two houses. You have two structures, which is like what we were talking about the ADU.
Yeah, but the question before you is a house on a lot. Okay, the owner wants to operate the house on the lot as a short-term rental.
As a short-term room just by itself.
Yes,
Just like the one we had.
Why is that not allowed?
That's-
It's lodging and lodging.
it's lodging.
Not in-
And lodging's not either a permitted or a conditionally permitted use in that zone.
That are with me?
So the question, The question is whether the operation of a short-term rental in that house could be considered a commercial enterprise related to a permitted use in that zone.
So would it make a difference if it was rented for the next year and a half, 2 years instead of short term?
Yeah, because that's not lodging.
It's
So
not,
that's not like,
they
No.
can't sleep there.
no, that's,
It doesn't make
That's
sense.
income
to me.
operation.
It doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, well, so it's short term. It's not this. Income
Classified.
property.
It's classified.
Okay,
Lodging is a transient stay. If you stay 30 days or more, it's not lodging.
So I have a question. So how long is this short stay basically going to be added to? 6 months? I mean, is there a certain time where that goes?
that would be in material in this.
the way
It's
it
just a
looks,
matter of
Randy, is it could be a
life.
week, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 30 days. It's
Right.
whatever someone wants to rent it.
Can't be more than 30 days.
Yeah, you know.
Right, we're just talking about lodging. So then, so now we're down to very simply, is lodging. So I'm thinking we're down to, is lodging related to single family residential use?
I mean, is it a commercial?
Enterprise
Use.
related to single family ownership. That's what I'm down to now, so. I mean, what do you guys think?
Oh, that's the same thing we were down to the last time.
Right, well, as long as we're all
Just a different
consistent
zone.
as to what that is.
Actually,
What is conditional?
that's not true,
Yeah.
Commissioner Granzo.
Huh?
That is not true.
But-
The last time you considered a short-term rental issue, it was in the general single-family zone. There's no conditionally permitted use, anything like this
Right.
in the general single-family zone. There was nothing in that zone that you could make an argument that it should be considered as being included in the code in its current form.
And this zone is,
This zone has a conditionally permitted use of a commercial enterprise related to a permitted use.
So is renting a single family dwelling as a short-term rental of commercial use?
I say yes, it's an income.
It is a commercial enterprise.
But is it related to a single family residential use? Correct? Is that what we gotta be relating it to something, to some.
The
permitted-
very first permitted building or use in the zone is single-family dwelling.
And that's the one we're gonna go with.
Any of them,
That's my point, any of them.
any
Yeah.
of them, but for this
Single
example,
family, dual family, RV park, you name it. And does that actually equate? Is that close enough connection between the two? In my mind, that's what I'm looking at. And I would say,
What are we looking to put on this piece?
we just don't worry about that.
Well, is it gonna be hooked up to their sewer,
What?
their water? It's gonna be its own water.
It's-
Oh, it's not.
Is if I have the house, I want to rent it out.
It's already there, it already,
Right.
yes. It already, well, you can't move in on for 30 days. But it's already there, it already exists, it's just saying that instead of using it as a single family. You can use it as a, that or is a right, Rob, that's what it boils down to. Instead of using it as one of the 10 permitted uses. We're saying it's related commercial use, therefore, we're gonna allow that.
Well, that is the question before you.
Good.
Okay,
Just want to make sure we're clear on the question.
what's the difference in this big, that blue house over here? Because they rent that out part-time as a vacation rental.
It's exactly the same.
It's
Oh,
exactly
is
the
it in
same.
the,
Well, how come they can do it then?
No, it's not. That's a non-conforming use down there. I'm saying it's the same use. I'm not saying their property's in that zone and it's the same situation. The city issued them a business license when that property was zoned light industrial.
You guys have any other questions? Does that make sense? With Rob,
Yeah, well, yeah,
are you sure?
yes, I just think what's good for one is good for someone else. I just don't, you know.
Well, first off, do you have any more questions for Rob? I hear crickets. Okay, good. Now I'm going to close the public testimony regarding the inquiry into this. And we'll have to decide.
Go for it.
Not my call, it's all of our calls.
So
I want to hear the arguments here with
Yeah.
us.
can I say something without thinking that I make the wrong question?
Sure.
Answer. In the definition, and I know this is here, that's my basis, the foundation, is on the short-term rentals. What is the part of the timing that they're in there? Is that even an
It's
issue?
not an issue. It's, and let's get rid of the word short-term rental. And let's just use the word lodging.
Yeah.
Whatever lodging is, right? Is it related to one of the uses that are presently allowed in the recreational zone?
Commercial use.
Yeah,
You
Or-
can't get rid of the term short-term rental. Mainly because after it goes over 30 days, it's no longer a short-term rental and it's a full rental and the discussion is mute.
correct.
Okay, see, that was the
Exactly.
question I was thinking.
But instead of
Overall-
saying short-term rental, substitute the word lodging.
Yes, up to 30 days, it's lodging.
Right,
And after 30 days, it's just a rental income.
right, exactly. And totally not part of the whole.
I sure like to know the scenario of this. Someone comes in, has a home, he's gone, he wants to rent his place out as additional income for his house. I mean, is that what we're talking about, basically? But on the recreational residential zone?
Mhm.
Does that mean that everybody gets smell it, they all can do that? We can have a whole floor, you know, unto these people? So is this like the,
Just in the RR zone.
okay, so no other zone, residential, recreational?
Well, here's my logic. We're talking about a residence. Somebody staying someplace, right? And now we're making a commercial use of it. So wouldn't that apply?
Well, when I think of residential recreational, I think of that area that people come, you know, whether it be in another state or country, people, you know, have vacation homes and they're gone 6 months, come back, they rent out the other 6 months. It's in the recreational area. Brings more people in.
Right.
So I mean,
Well, we're
I'm just
just
trying to think of the
interpreting-
viability of this.
And remember, we're not saying whether it's good or bad. We're just
Right,
interpreting.
and I'm just trying to figure out, for me to grab the interpretation is to get that foundation in.
Yeah.
So that,
That was the
I'm a
stuff that
Missouri guy, you
Robin,
gotta show me this type of thing.
and that was the stuff that Robin mentioned about the comprehensive plan.
Okay,
Yeah.
I have a question. Over on the creek, we had earlier where it was seasonal. And we determined that seasonal was one season. There's 4 seasons in each year. And they have it where they can rent out a portion of their land.
But that was in marine commercial.
Green commercial,
Yeah, that was in the marine commercial.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't pertain to this at all?
This is just this, this is the only place that they mention commercial, related commercial use. Right, Rob?
Okay,
So
Okay,
it's
so
kind of
from
a
there-
weird thing that's actually used a lot.
it's the zoning.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
this place, you know, the short term or the lodging area, it is basically what I'm saying, the people who come in to rent for recreating and being lakeside. It's not to bring all their equipment in and park it for construction stuff. I mean, is it just
Right. Just this scenario. that
I mean,
we're
I think
talking
if I own the home, I wouldn't want to have other things come in. I remember my brother, he had a rental by Brookings. And he rented it, next thing he knows, he lives in Grants Pass. And here, that rental became a big RV park. You know what I mean? So
Right.
the idea was that the structure, the persons who's responsible of this short term probably has already laid the foundation of what it's gonna take to keep that building going.
But we're just talking about this small
Correct.
specific thing about, hey, is a short term like one of the uses in the residential recreation area?
Well, the only thing I think of is, we're thinking about this now. Doesn't mean that a month from now, someone else will do the same thing here. And I just want to keep the refreshness of what we did here so that we can be more forthright and more understanding on their behalf. So I mean, this is kind of like the foundation of the idea to see if it works.
We're just interpreting.
Yeah, we're
So,
just,
for the
Right.
future.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay. So my thought is, I'll throw it out there. My thought is it's related. It's related to, it's flat out, it's a commercial use that somebody staying in a place. So it's a weak relation. I definitely will say that, and I don't want to get into the slippery slope of, oh, anything, this permit will, I see one word in there, so there it's related. I don't want to get into that. But I think in this limited environment, in this limited situation, I think that's kind of what the code was getting at, because remember, recreational residential was set up basically for seasonal, seasonal living, stuff like that. It wasn't really meant, it is meant to be residential, so people can be right on the lake and everything like that. But due to the geography of the area, it's not really.
There's
So-
nothing detrimental here to this city. Okay. Is there?
I've been racking my brain and I can't find anything.
So we're saying that at this particular moment, this photographic moment in time, there is no other people using their homes in the recreational area for short-term or lodging.
Well,
You can't say that.
that's irrelevant, whether they're,
Well, I'm just
whether
trying to say that-
whether they're doing something or not is irrelevant. We're just looking at the code right now.
Right.
So that's, I say it's okay in my book.
I'm saying it's
Are we ready to, I make a motion to close discussion?
all second that,
All in favor, say aye.
right?
Okay. So I make a motion to issue a finding that the operation of a short-term rental within the RR zone is conditionally permitted use under MC 155.102 parentheses or paragraph number 5.
I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That's how we interpret it. Yeah, that's nice, Rob, but you put that up there on the board so I can read off. All right, so the next one is the final plat review of the partition for Mr. Watson. I will open the Public Planning Commission review of a request for final approval of the partition PAR 2022-04 Watson. The inquiry begins at 6:30 p.m. Thursday, July 6, 2023. My name is Mark Crouch, Planning Commissioner Chair, and I will be presiding over this inquiry. This inquiry is about whether the applicant has satisfied the conditions of the final approval that were set by the Planning Commission at the conclusion of the public hearing that resulted in a tentative approval. The inquiry is not about whether the partition should be approved. The property owner cannot be required to meet any standards for final approval that exceed those set at the time of the tentative approval. The inquiry will be conducted as follows. The staff will first present the staff report identifying applicable criteria and presenting evidence regarding whether the criterion have been met and the recommendations of staff. The applicant will have the opportunity to respond to the staff report. The staff will have the opportunity to respond to comments of the applicant. After each presentation, I will ask whether the commissioners have any questions for the presenter. Okay, Bob?
Okay, so the commission held a hearing on PAR 2022-04 Watson on September 15th of 2023. And the partition is to convert tax lot 23S 12W 17-1002 into 2 lots. And at the time of application and original hearing, the applicant had submitted 2 different and incomplete tentative maps for consideration. This was the first one, and it was the tentative partition plan was drawn on the final plat from an earlier partition. And this was the second one. And then the commission issued a tentative approval with specific conditions for final approval. And the conditions were derived from Lakeside Ordinance 194, which governs land division. And under that ordinance, the commission can either delegate authority for final approval to the city administration, or it can reserve those rights for final approval to itself. And in this case, you wanted final approval yourselves. And sometime, I'm not sure the exact date, sometime between June 2nd and June 8th of 2023, the property owner hand delivered to me some documentation. And he asked that the documents he gave me be forwarded to commission for final approval of the partition. And on reviewing the documentation, I found that there were 3 maps in those documents, and none of the 3 has any unique identifying markers. So I've labeled them out of convenience as A, B, and C. This was the email that came with it. The property owner's surveyor is presenting them as tentative partition plats and notes that there are 3 different maps. And then this was the first map, which I'm calling A. This was the second one that I'm calling B. And this is, there we go. This is the third one that I'm calling C. So no indication at the time I received them as to which one was to be considered the final map. And so when I realized I had 3 maps on my hands, I communicated with the property owner and the surveyor about the fact that I had 3 and that there were some issues with them. The surveyor subsequently provided me with a 4th map that was marked as the final partition plat. And this is the 4th map. The property owner has never designated anyone as his agent regarding the partition application. So the property owner has to be the party to indicate which map is to be considered as the final map for approval by the Planning Commission. And he's never requested that I use the map I received by the surveyor. The only indication I've ever received is that I'm to use the 3 maps that were given to me together earlier. I did communicate with the property owner that he needed to tell me if I was going to present the final plat to you as the background for final approval, but the response I got was that multiple maps wouldn't be helpful, but I wasn't told which specific map to use. A notice. The notice has been made for public meetings because this is not a hearing on a land use decision. So we'll go to findings, conditions of final approval. The first condition was that the final plat has to conform with all requirements of Ordinance 194, Section 2.200, which is the general requirements for plat maps. And I'm not qualified to evaluate whether a map is fully compliant with those requirements. It references the state laws for surveyors, and I would like to suggest that we assume that the surveyor knows what he's doing better than I do. I could tell that map B of the first three maps does not meet this standard because some required elements are missing. Maps A, C, and the final plat meet all of the standards that I'm qualified to evaluate. The second condition was that each parcel depicted on the plat has to have a minimum front lot or building line width of 60 feet and a minimum depth of 100 feet. And this condition is met on all four maps. The third condition is that all new easements on the subject property for access, drainage, and/or utilities shall be recorded with Coos County, and the location and width of these easements shall be on the final plat. And maps A, C, and the final plat meet the requirements for location and width of the easements. Map B does not meet the standard. It doesn't show the easement. And none of the maps meet the requirement that the easement be recorded with the county. I'd like to suggest to you that that's probably not an issue because the intent to have the easement recorded prior to or concurrent with the approval of the final plat is satisfied under state law. ORS 92.050 sub 6 says that when you record a partition plat, if there's an easement on it, the easement goes into effect as soon as the plat map is recorded.
Okay.
Condition 4 was that the applicant provide to the city certification from the Lakeside Water District that water will be available to parcel 2 and the water infrastructure complies with the requirements of the Lakeside Water District has been installed at least to the lot line of parcel 2. And the city did receive certification from the water district that supply is available. The requirement to have infrastructure installed to the lot lines is already satisfied because the street abutting the property is not a dedicated street, it's a private road. And the lot lines extend to the midline of the street and the utility pipes already pass through the property. So the pipes are already at the lot line or within it. So this condition's been met. Condition 5 is the same as condition 4, except it's with regard to sewer lines. And the same situation exists there. We got certification from the wastewater treatment plant that service would be available to parcel 2. And the sewer line is already within the lot lines of the proposed parcel 2. The 6th condition was that the applicant submit plans for water and sewer infrastructure and an access route to parcel 2 prior to commencement of installation. And there is no installation. The utilities are already there. And the proposal on the plat maps is that parcel 2 would be using the existing access from the road, and an easement would be granted to parcel 1, allowing parcel 1 to use the same access. So since there's no infrastructure being developed and no new access points, There's no plans, there's nothing for the city engineer to review, and there's no steep slope considerations because there's no development as part of the partition. I did notice an error. All 4 maps state that the property is zoned RR, and it's actually zoned multifamily residential or MR. But that's also not an issue because zoning is not determined by plat maps. And the recommendation of staff is that final approval be issued, provided that the property owner indicates that the map to be recorded is one that satisfies the conditions of approval. So that would be maps A or C, or the one labeled as a final plat, with the final plat being the preferred version because it's labeled final plat. And as noted before, the lack of recording of a new easement doesn't pose any risk to future owners because recording the map brings the easement into effect. And I just want to remind all of you that under state law, you can't impose conditions of final approval that are more stringent than or in addition to the conditions that were imposed at the time of tentative approval. So no new requirements.
Questions, Rob?
You get your options.
No options.
Sorry. Your options are to make a motion for final approval. Again, you have to specify what plat you're approving. Or you could have a motion for denial, but you'd need findings for that. And you could also have a motion to table the decision pending specific outcomes or information. Now I'm done.
Okay, any questions? No?
No.
Okay. Ed, would you like to say anything?
I wasn't
Oh,
aware-
we can go up to the mic so we can hear you.
I can hand you one, Ted. That's easier.
In the material that I was sent in the public notice of this hearing, I wasn't aware that I was going to be given the opportunity to speak. So although I have some documents here that I've gone over, I don't have anything prepared other than perhaps to point out that the recommendation of staff was that it be approved.
So I have one question for you. It's the burning question we all want to know. What map? The
Well,
final,
without going into it, I think there's some confusion about all of that. Okay, so I said without going into it, so I won't go into it. There is a reason that there were 3 maps there. And I think it was a good reason. And the map that I would like to have submitted and that we will use for our survey is the one marked final survey.
okay, great.
That's the one we want.
Any more questions? Okay, we're open for discussion.
Any problems with anything, as long as we're using that final map?
Map 4 and it meets all the criteria and then
Anything for you guys?
I agree.
Okay, I'll close discussion. All in favor?
I.
Aye. That was unanimous.
Yes.
Okay,
Thanks so much.
good deal. All right, now, we have another code interpretation. I will now open public inquiry of a request for code interpretation on the question of whether the act of requesting an extension to the expiration of a conditional use permit results in the holding of expiration until the planning commission can consider the request. The inquiry begins at, let's just say, 6:54, Thursday, July 6, 2023. My name is Mark Crouch. Planning Commissioner Chair, I will be presiding over this inquiry. The inquiry is about the interpretation of the current code. It is not about whether the current code should or should not be changed. The inquiry will be conducted as follows. The staff will first present the staff report, identifying the applicable criterion and presenting the code interpretations of the staff. After the staff presentation, I will ask whether the commissioners have any questions for the staff. I would like to inform you of several things prior to the beginning of the hearing. The applicable substantive criterion that apply to the inquiry are contained in the written staff report and will be identified and discussed in the oral staff report. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards these inquiries or these criterion or other criterion in the comprehensive plan or development code that apply to this inquiry. So staff, please present.
Okay, as a background, code section 155.245, which is titled expiration of conditional use permits, sets an expiration date for every conditional use permit. And prior to the expiration date, property owner has to do one of three things. They either have to start using the new conditional use, or if construction is necessary, they have to commence construction for that use, or they have to obtain an extension of the expiration date from the Planning Commission. And staff is looking for clarification from the commission so that this section of code can be properly implemented. And so the first question is, well, what constitutes commencement of construction rather? Taken at face value, it means you've started construction. Some people might argue that it means you've got a permit to start construction, or you've applied for a permit, and some others may argue you don't even need permits. The fact that you're doing site preparation is the commencement of construction. And the second question is, does the act of requesting an extension of the expiration date create a temporary extension pending commission consideration? And so if a property owner requests an extension and it's too close to the expiration date for the commission to consider the request, does that mean the expiration has to be put on hold pending the commission's next meeting? And if that's the case, if the property owner then commences construction after the original expiration date, but before the commission can meet to discuss an extension, does that void the entire expiration process? So regarding whether requesting an extension automatically extends the time frame of the conditional use permit, the city attorney was asked for an opinion, and he observed that the code specifies that a permit expires 6 months after it becomes effective. And he observed that some jurisdictions process a request for extension as long as it is received prior to expiration. And he says if the commission wants to interpret the code this way, you just have to acknowledge that a written request prior to the expiration date secures the owner's right to have the Planning Commission decide whether or not to honor the request when they next meet. Or the commission could simply find that the permit expires after 6 months. You have either option as a legal standing. And the city attorney also was of the opinion that placing this question before the commission was the proper thing to do, especially since you're the ones who have to interpret the code. Notice was made as required for public meetings. There was not a publication of notice, and there was no mailing of notice because this is not a land use decision. So we'll move to findings. So regarding expiration of conditional use permits. This is the actual code section on the screen right now. A conditional use permit shall be subject to the plans and other conditions upon the basis of which it was granted, and shall terminate and become void unless, 1, the use authorized for such permit shall have commenced or construction necessary thereto shall have commenced on or before the time limit specified in such permit and thereafter diligently advanced. Or 2, if no time limit is specified, on or before 6 months after the date the permit became effective. Or number 3, such period of time may be extended by the Planning Commission for a period of 6 months, but not in excess of 18 months from the date the first order granting became effective. What this code section does not contain is any indication that property owners have a right or an expectation of a deadline extension. It doesn't contain any property owner process rights or responsibilities. It doesn't contain any process requirements for the Planning Commission, and it doesn't contain any criteria for approval or denial of requested deadline extension. As we've already discussed this evening, section 004 of the zoning code interpretation requires that the Planning Commission do the interpretation. It says where a condition imposed by any provision of this ordinance, should say code, is less restrictive than a comparable provision, the provisions which are more restrictive shall govern. It shall be the duty of the Planning Commission to A, interpret the provisions of the code in such a way as to carry out its intent and purpose, and B, to rule on proper application and interpret the meaning of the zoning code in case there's a dispute between the administrative officials of the city and any owner or owners of a property. And the staff interpretation of this is that the Planning Commission is the body with the authority and responsibility to interpret the zoning code, and that interpretation is based on intent and purpose of the code. As section 003 states the purpose of the code, and that's part of what you're required to use to interpret the code. I believe there's roughly 15 or 16 different elements to the purpose, and I was unable to identify any sections of the purpose of the code that relate to the expiration of conditional use permits or anything else in code section 245. For intent, looking at the language of section 245 itself, it says that the use or the construction shall have commenced on or before the time limit specified in such permit and thereafter diligently advanced. And my interpretation of the language and its intent is that once a conditional use permit is granted, the property owner is expected to start the necessary work within 6 months and to subsequently finish that work without any undue delay. The language that's in the code refers to commencement of construction, and I'm unable to find any content within the zoning code that indicates that means anything other than its plain face value, the actual start of construction. And our code doesn't have a definition of construction, so I looked at the Oregon Structural Specialty Code, which defines it as the systematic process, act, or manner of constructing or assembling a building in part or in whole, and any system, device, or equipment regulated by the state building code. And so under that definition, permit application or issuance of a permit or site preparation are not elements of actual construction. Staff is unaware of any aspect of the zoning code that would support the stay of a mandated conditional use permit expiration based on a receipt of request for extension, but with no determination by the commission. But you can decide that there is one if you like. And the city attorney has opined that the commission is within its right to decide whether the conditional use permits just expire when the date comes along, or that the expiration is held over pending your consideration of a request for extension. So staff recommendations are that the commission should issue a determination on the proper application of the section 245, which covers expiration. Staff also recommends that commencement of construction be based on the OSSC definition of construction, so that it's actual construction and not plans permitting or site preparation. And staff recommends that property owners be required to obtain an extension prior to the expiration date. Your options on this question are to adopt the recommendations of staff, or to adopt a different interpretation. And you can also table the issue, but you shouldn't do that unless you need specific additional information. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. Questions? Anybody?
So we just want to identify this, that they can get an extension if they're not through building. 6 months is not very long.
Well, first let's answer the first question. About what is the start of construction? Why don't we do that first? And I agree, the state code is the best. I mean, you gotta be building. No, well, I got a permit type thing.
If they have to file for an extension, the work.
Or they're not.
They want to
Well,
file it.
But we're just talking about the start of construction.
What?
In other words, what
defines
constitutes the actual, not the other part about the request.
Not
just
getting the
the-
permit to start.
Because the easy one is that one.
Having shovel ready. Would that be started construction? If that doesn't make sense, if the shovel ready could be a month after, or,
Exactly.
so, I mean, basically, you go in and you have your permit and the paperwork should be the start.
Physical work.
I'm thinking physical work.
Physical
Really?
work.
Yeah.
Well, so the guy can have all the paperwork he wants for 2 years. And then later on, once he puts the shovel in the ground, he has 6 months from then to build it.
No,
No,
Well, that's
Well, we're
just
trying-
the-
right. So what we don't want to do is have somebody sitting there with the paperwork for 2 years.
Right.
We're saying that, hey, in 6 months, you got to start. And that's the interpretation that Rob was stating the state does.
okay, but when I built my home on the lake, you get your permits, and you have to have inspections every so often in order to keep your permits going.
Right, but if you put in a hole in the ground that was for your post, you started construction.
They require a little more than that. You have to actively you have to show them that you're working it. I had a lot of inspections over just doing all this stuff. And in order to keep your permits active, you have to have.
Right, so
inspections.
that's construction permits. I'm just talking about the expiration of conditional. Saying, hey, you got to show that you're starting the work somewhere.
You building a place you get to stay on the property until you get it built.
Well, whatever
conditional use?
those permits are, this is just simply saying, this is all in regards to the actual conditional use and whether the conditional use expires or not. And what we're saying is we need to determine when they first started working on it to see whether we revoke the permit or not because of inaction for 6 months.
Who actually checks on them?
I guess Roberts.
You do? Okay,
So we're looking first to clarify what is the start of construction? Is it when you pull a permit? Or is it when you actually do something physical?
Something physical.
you can pull the permit, and if, does the permit have an expiration date? I think they do. And if they don't, it's probably gonna be when it's physical, when they actually start getting a hole and putting in a foundation.
Construction permits expire if you go longer than 6 months without reaching an inspection point.
See, now that's what I was talking about.
But that's not the issue before you.
Okay,
So the issue before you is, when does a conditional use permit expire? Okay, and so if somebody gets a conditional use permit and they can't start the use because there's construction required first, they have 6 months to start construction. So when they put in an application for a building permit, did they start construction? When they got a building permit issued, did they start construction? If they have no permits and haven't applied for one, but they've started site preparation, is that construction? Or is it when they actually do the work that the building permit is issued for? Is that when construction starts?
that's a deep hole, because you can have, you're talking about letting someone stay in an RV on the property. while they're
It has
doing
nothing to do
construction.
with staying on the property or an RV or anything else.
It's just.
It's
construction.
how long can they sit on their conditional use permit before they
Okay.
start
Oh,
construction?
gotcha.
And what event is it that you're going to call the start of construction?
Permits or
But you can't,
physical.
yeah.
So staff is recommending that we follow the Oregon Structural Specialty Code definition,
Which is,
which is. Yep. What you put in here, let's see. The systematic process, act, or manner of constructing or assembling a building in part or in whole of any system, device, or equipment regulated by the state building code. So actually doing the act
Physical.
or manner of constructing.
Right, physical. When it starts construction.
that makes
So it makes
sense.
sense.
It does
We're
make
following
sense.
legal
So
guidelines.
start construction.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
agree.
I like that.
I would agree with that too.
Now, the second question is how long can a person request a extension?
I think that the person should be able to go to the last day of the thing to request one. As long as they request it before it expires.
And I'd agree with you because it's very hard to determine an actual date. Otherwise, you get a very variable date saying, well, it's going to take this long to convene the planning commission. And what if we don't have a quorum, then
My only concern with that is that if tomorrow it expires and I request it today, okay, does that mean I have to wait till the next committee before I can even start again?
Right, because
Yes.
it's expired.
I would agree with that. You can't start. And the exploration, since it's an extension to it, it's 6 months and then 12 months from the start. It's not, oh, I get an extra month because I'm waiting for the planning commission to decide. So you've already lost a month in between.
So they have to apply for an extension prior to the expiration. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I wouldn't wait till the last minute. I mean,
I wouldn't
they
wait.
know, they're smart, they know what it's gonna take.
Let Rob tell them no.
I agree, you shouldn't wait that long, but I think by all fairness and all reality and all that, it should be allowed that they do that.
Okay, you're
Yeah.
saying as long as it was in a written request prior to the actual date of expiration, it
Right.
should be considered.
Right.
I see what he's saying too.
Right, it's just clean.
Yes.
This is the day.
Mhm.
I mean, and a lot of people who come in front of us are not very sophisticated. And. Wow. Okay, let me rephrase. That was a bad thing to say.
Yeah.
Are not sophisticated in developing land.
There you go.
You know, it's something
It's a
new
learning
to them the
process.
first time. Excuse me, you are right.
Life is just a learning process.
Not anything else except for that very defined explanation.
Okay, so where are we at? They have to have a written request for an extension prior to the deadline of expiry. Is that where we're at? Is that what you're talking about? I agree with that. Because if there's not a meeting that day or that week, it has to be prior to the deadline. They have to put it in writing that they want.
So you're saying the request, they can request up to the deadline date.
And then on the next meeting, it would be considered to extend it,
Right.
but it wouldn't necessarily mean it expires and they have to start all over again.
Well, did it,
Right.
I think that it has to be written prior to, a written request prior to the expiration. I think that's fair.
What do you guys say over there?
Think about expiration. You know. Expired, then they can wait.
Well,
just like Carl said, they should have up until the very last day to request an extension, but then it does expire until
Yeah.
the commission approves it, if it's approved.
Right, well, they don't know if it's approved, so they can't go
So
ahead.
it's expired. And then come, 2 weeks, a month later, when it gets approved, if it gets approved, then it continues.
So you're saying they shouldn't be able to work on it until it is reapproved.
Well, because they're literally working.
What if it
on
doesn't, what if it
something.
doesn't? get
Remember.
approved?
I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, when would we ever say no, since they started it and they're doing goodwill and building the house, they got the third bedroom up.
Well, but that's a separate question. We're just
Right,
working
but I'm
on
just
the
saying that,
expiration at this point.
Well, that's what I'm saying, they would not want to jeopardize. They would want to come in, I would think.
Well, the thing is, Randy, they would, if they have already started construction, that's a mute.
Right.
Right, they wouldn't be going.
Yeah, they wouldn't be
allowed.
going for
They
that.
would be-
Yeah.
This is only for people who have not done anything. for
If
6
we were
months.
here, if we were here 5 days a week, it'd be different. But we have meetings periodically. And sometimes that's not when they
Right.
need to apply. But if they put it in writing prior to, we could on the next meeting approve it. If they're diligently working. And I think that's fair.
Yeah. Need more discussion on this?
I said
Okay,
I was
I'm,
done. 3 comments ago. I said I was done.
I move to close discussion on this. Does anybody
Wait
want
a
to,
second.
does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. Are these what you suggested?
Excuse me?
Based
No.
on the state,
Are these two things what the staff recommended? Or just the first one?
First one.
Just the first one.
Okay. I make a motion that we recommend, we approve what the staff recommended for the first item. And that the second item, that it's. Not all it.
How about-
That a person can request an extension up until the day that their expiration date.
That works.
I second the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are you?
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous? All right.
Okay, before you move on to the next agenda item, I've been handed a note that says that no motion was made to vote on the Watson partition.
Did we make a motion to vote?
You just voted.
He just voted. They're saying you need to make a motion to vote.
Yeah, okay. Let's go back. So this one is done. Let's go back. And if we didn't make a motion, we will go ahead. I thought we made a motion to close discussion, then I made a motion on the approval.
I'll re-motion.
Yeah, just remotion. Yeah.
I motion to approve the partition par 2022-04 Watson, consistent with the findings of the staff report of June 22nd, 2023.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for checking that. Getting old, creating my memory. And my PC-ness, I guess, too. All right, so we are
Wow.
now on the extension request. Exploration, public service experts. I will now open public planning commission review of a request for an extension of the expiration for CU 2022-02. Blanchard. The inquiry begins at 7:20 Thursday, July 6, 2023. My name is Mark Crouch, Planning Commissioner Chair, and I will be presiding over this inquiry. This inquiry is about whether the applicant should be granted an extension of the regulatory expiration date for CU 2022-02 Blanchard. The inquiry is not about whether the conditional use should or should not be allowed. The inquiry will be conducted as follows. The staff will first present the staff report, identify applicable criterion, present evidence regarding whether the criterion have been met, and the recommendations of staff. The applicant will have an opportunity to respond to the staff report. The staff will have the opportunity to respond to the comments of the application. After each presentation, I will ask whether the commissioners have any questions for the presenter. I would like to inform you of several things prior to the beginning of the inquiry. The application of substantive criteria that apply to the inquiry are conducted in the written staff report and will be identified and discussed in the oral staff report. Testimony, arguments, evidence must be directed towards criterion and other criterion in the comprehensive plan or development code that apply to this inquiry. Will the staff please present the staff report?
Sure. So we'll start with the background. The Planning Commission approved conditional use permit CU 2022-02 Balancier on November 3rd, 2022. It became effective after an appeal period on November 19th, 2022, and construction was necessary prior to beginning the conditionally permitted use. And as we've discussed earlier, MC 155.245 sets an expiration date of 6 months after a conditional use permit goes into effect, unless the commission sets a different date. The commission did not set a different date on CU 2022-02. And per MC 155.245, the expiration date for this conditional use permit was May 19th of 2023. On May 15th, 2023, staff received an information request from the property owner regarding how much it would cost to start construction and how long the property owner could delay construction after paying those fees. And staff provided the requested information, advised the property owner that fees were non-refundable, advised the property owner that the conditional use permit was about to expire and that permits could not be issued prior to that expiration date. The reason for that is you apply for permits and then the permit applications go to the building official who then approves them and tells the city how much the permit fee is going to be. And then the city collects that fee and then issues the permit. And sometimes that takes time getting back from the building official. On May 16th of 2023, the property owner claimed that a deadline other than 6 months had been requested in the original application for conditional use permit. Staff went back and looked at the application and verified that this was inaccurate. During the November 3rd, 2022 hearing, the property owner had asked that the 6-month time period for commencing construction not begin until after construction was completed. And the commission didn't discuss that during the hearing. This is effectively a request that the property owner be exempted from time limits, and it was something that the commission doesn't have authority to grant. On May 17th, 2023, the property owner requested an extension of the expiration date. So that was 2 days before the expiration date. And staff informed the property owner that only the commission could make a decision on that, and that it was impossible to schedule, notice, and convene a public meeting in 2 days. On May 22nd, 2023, staff sent notice via written mail to the property owner that the conditional use permit had expired. And on May 24th, the property owner sent an email claiming that construction had already commenced and that staff had prevented her from paying permit fees required to initiate construction. On June 1st, 2023, the property owner sent staff an email requesting that an appeal to the request for expiration date extension be heard by the Lakeside City Council and claimed that work had commenced in April. On June 20th, 2023, staff received a letter from the property owner alleging that staff had denied the request for extension, that the property owner had not been provided with a notice of hearing, that the property owner had not received a form for requesting an expiration extension, and asserted that the request for extension of expiration requires a public hearing. The owner also requested that the public hearing be provided, that the notice of public hearing be provided, and that all correspondence be routed through her attorney. The same day, staff received a letter from the property owner's attorney, which restated the property owner's demand that the conditional use permit be reinstated, but contained no allegations of improper process. After receiving these letters, staff consulted with the city attorney, and the city attorney recommended that the property owner's request for extension of expiration should only be considered by the commission if the commission determines that the property owner has a right to have such a request heard, which you just did, and even if the earliest possible date for consideration falls after the expiration date. A notice was made as required for public meetings. There was no publication and no mailing of notice because this isn't a land use decision. Findings, MC 155.245 requires that construction shall have commenced on or before the permit time limit specified. And since none was specified, that would be 6 months after the date the permit became effective. That same section says that the Planning Commission can extend it for a period of 6 months, but not in excess of 18 months from the date the first order granting became effective. Only the commission has the authority to grant post-authorization time limit extensions. The extensions are optional. The code does not contain any procedures or criteria. Extensions may only be 6 months in length, no more, no less. That's how it was written. And you can only grant 2 because more than 2 takes you more than 18 months past the original date. Okay, section 004 is interpretation. And in this case, the property owner's interpretation of the code is different from that of staff. So effectively, there's a disagreement between staff and the property owner, and that's to be settled by code interpretation by the commission. And your interpretation has to be consistent with the intent and purpose of the code. As I stated earlier this evening, I can't find anything in the section of code detailing purpose that relates to this matter. That leaves us with the intent, and as discussed earlier, my contention was that the intent was in the actual language, that it shall have commenced on or before the time limit and thereafter diligently advanced. So it has to start on time and then be completed without undue delay. And earlier this evening, you agreed to use the OSCC definition of construction, which is here again. There was a previous extension request that the commission recently heard. It was different. The owner was unable to get architectural designs completed due to COVID issues, and the owner sought and received extension well before the expiration date. In this case, the owner is claiming the delay was due to the fact that winter happens and you can't do the work when it's wet. And extension was sought 2 days before the expiration, but now we know that's not an issue. Okay, and there are some additional materials that aren't in your packet that were only provided to me today. From the property owner.
Thank you.
Excuse me, David?
Information that we can see above.
You'll be able to see them. They'll be attached to the minutes. Yeah. Okay, so the first piece of documentation that I received from the property owner today was an email requesting that these materials be distributed to the commission. There were, and a restatement of a request for extension. And she said that all contractors are in place, have been in place, and are ready to roll. The second item was a partial image of written comments that the property owner read aloud during the original conditional use permit hearing. And the content of that message is already reflected in the staff report. That was where, let me read it here. I am requesting that the CU permit timeline not start ticking until after I get the sewer line, water line, and electric pole into the spot. So she asked that the time to commence construction not begin until construction was completed.
Which item are you on there?
Item 2.
Item 2.
Item 3 is a sketch map of the property from the original conditional use permit application. And the property owner has circled the sentence, sewer will be pulled from sewer main at 8th and train tracks, which doesn't appear to be relevant to the issue of extension. Item number 4 is not provided to the Planning Commission because it legally can't be provided. It's a document that purports to be a partial transcript of a recording of the city manager in a private conversation. The recording was made in violation of ORS 165.540C. Consequently, the use of the transcript or conveying it to other people is in itself a violation of ORS 165.540E, and that's why I can't provide it to you. It's not legal for me to do so. Item number 5 is an image of a letter from staff to the property owner. That letter is not in these additional materials because it's already in the meeting packet. It's the letter I sent to the property owner informing them that the conditional use permit had expired. And the property owner had drawn arrows towards the word has expired. Let's see, the 6th item is an image of a letter from the property owner to the Planning Commission, city manager, and staff. And that was already in the staff report as Exhibit I. So I didn't give it to you again. The only difference was that the new version doesn't have the property owner's signature, and in place of signature is the word copy. Item number 7 is an image of a document of unknown medium. Don't know if it's a letter or an email or what, from the property owner to her attorney. And most of the document contains portions of a transcript discussing the extension of expiration date that the commission granted to CU 2021-08 Lions. And the 8th item is a letter dated 6/27/23 from the property owner to the city manager. The document is a request for public information made by the property owner. And the property owner has written a note on it regarding an email from staff informing her that the meeting of November 3rd, 2022 was not recorded. That is the statement of fact. That meeting was not recorded, and that is also reflected in the minutes of that meeting. And now my recommendations in the staff report and here on the screen don't really hold anymore because you've issued an interpretation now that having asked too close to the expiration date for you to hear it, the expiration should be stayed until you get a chance to hear it. So feel free to ignore this recommendation. Okay, so your options are the Planning Commission can grant an extension of expiration date, with the extended expiration date being exactly November 19th, 2023, because you can only extend for 6 months. And the Planning Commission can deny the request. And you don't need to rely on my interpretation of anything to do that because there's no criteria, it's up to you. And you can also table the issue for future consideration pending the receipt of specific information or evidence.
And we get that information.
Wait,
Okay.
potentially, the applicant is on the call.
Does the applicant want to say anything? Okay.
Yes, sure.
So we saw your items here. I don't see any of these items that relate to the progress of your project.
First, I must argue in a respectful way, as respectful as I can, that I believe that the city just created a very biased situation for all of the planning commissioners that are sitting there right now at the meeting.
But
And there,
Lauren,
I'm just stating,
we
I'm
have to
stating,
stick to the facts here.
okay, in order for me to appeal, I need to show that there is bias here. Secondly, I asked for a conditional use permit extension. One was granted without thought, with thought that the progress would continue to Lyons. One should be granted to me that it will be continued. I could have had this job done already. You cannot dig a 6-foot ditch with water in it. That's why I originally wanted my information in here that was left out because somehow the recording was lost. You cannot dig a ditch until the water stops pumping out from under your homes. Because the ditch, if you go to the beach and you dig a ditch that's full of water, it will cave in. The same thing happens here. So I did all my prep work in advance. I called and had an appointment with an electrician. I started the small ditch for the electrical work. I bought the pole. I could not dig the ditch, the 3 to 6 foot ditch until the water receded. And then you only have a short time to put your utilities in before it caves again because it's too dry. I think many people who have lived here a long time know this to be fact. And that is a very important part of this situation. I think most people know I don't procrastinate. I do things on time. I do them in a timely manner. I do them when they have to be done. And also my contractor, in order to get the ditch dug, is on a time frame. So that's why I asked if there's a time limit on the sewer connection, because if you don't get your contractor, you can't have something expire. And Rob Ward said to me, I shouldn't, I don't know whether I'm interpreting verbatim or not, but that be careful when you buy the permit because you could lose your money. So therefore I asked, because contractors can say they're 6 weeks out, or contractors say they have to come immediately. So that's about all I have to say.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? No? Okay. Is there any additional information staff wants to provide?
Nope.
All right, let's go ahead and discuss it. To make a motion to open discussion. Discussion's open.
It's open.
Yes, open.
Well, with our interpretation of requesting an extension prior to the expiration date, make that by us making that decision, everything else right now is moot. Or she did make the extension, request for extension prior to that date, so it's just a fact of, do we extend it or don't we? And if we don't do it, why don't we?
I would agree. That's what that is the question. Any comments about?
So is the digging of the electrical ditch not considered then construction?
Were there any permits pulled for the construction?
No.
No.
Correct.
Yeah, it's site preparation.
Not actual.
I don't know how to go with this one, to be honest with you. I'm gonna put out a couple thoughts and we'll go from there. We've never denied an extension. Ever. I don't think we've ever denied an extension, period. So there's that. But then, has there been true diligence on this?
Will this be
I mean, or was it just, because I'm looking at this list of what, 8 items, and none of them had to do with the project itself. They're all just like complaining about other people and other things, so I'm mixed either way.
Will this be the second extension?
This is
The
the
first extension.
First,
I mean, I don't want to get my emotions in with the whole thing, but
Orange will.
But I still say that if she met the requirements of requesting an extension prior to her expiration date. And we have set a precedence in the past of not denying extensions.
yeah, that's being.
I think she's met her requirement and she deserves to have the extension. This other stuff is,
Yeah, I know, and I gotta get that out of my mind.
What
Yeah.
else?
this stuff and all that, I mean, it's nothing to do with.
I just wish I wasn't involved with that, other than we just did, a clinical approach to this.
Can
Oh.
anybody think of a time that we've denied an extension?
you've only considered one.
Well, I'm talking about, I'm going even broader
Okay,
about all the continuations and all that stuff to it. I mean, we never have told anybody that, they didn't have their stuff, so they were out.
And so would you only be considering denying it because of the length of time? She's had 6 months. to work on
And the
it,
diligence.
Claims it's because of the weather.
Well, I'll tell you, the weather was very bad this last year for rain, it was everywhere. Which was good. Anyways, I think that
And this goes back to the comment I shouldn't have made.
yeah, I agree with you all about the situation that since we pushed the idea of this extension, that we would be contradicting ourselves or self about not doing it, since we basically made an effort to do it.
Yeah,
I make a motion that we accept this extension of conditional use permit.
I second it.
okay, all of those in favor say aye.
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 I
I have to say aye, taking the emotion out of it, I'll say aye. That's what I had to do. You're out. Okay. Unanimous.
Can you speak up? We want to hear that.
Aye.
That was.
Yeah, I wasn't,
Um,
I just said,
okay. So,
I,
had a very busy night. But we've gone through everything. Now, did I miss any procedural steps? Yeah. By the way, that is my trademark.
we voted on it.
Yeah.
Yes, you did. Public comments.
No, that's me. Now we're ready for public comments.
Public comments for each hearing.
no,
No, these weren't
No.
hearings. These were,
They were hearings because I checked with the LCD.
no,
no.
You can call them what you want, but DLCD said that they were hearings. And I'm not sure, I wasn't here in the beginning, so I'm not sure if it's written through this language as far as private conflict of interest. Or what's really.
right, these weren't hearings.
But they were.
Okay. No, I agree with this.
Okay. Well, I double checked before, and.
Okay.
I have a comment. I thought your interpretation meant going forward from this point on. And anything prior would fall back previously to what was said up until your day. Because it's not finalized until it gets recorded and everything's done. My personal thought about that.
There is a point there.
Didn't catch that.
interpretation going forward, right?
Yeah.
Right, it's interpretation.
What he's saying, but all this other stuff was predetermined. It was like, I get where he's coming from.
No, nothing was
Forward,
predetermined.
Your extensions now, from this point on, can be up to the date of your expiration. Previously, they weren't allowed. So this one, I would think, would fall under the previous category.
No,
Definition previously.
yeah, there was no definition previous, so. That's why we had to figure out what we were gonna do with that.
I'll come up with a speaker.
Okay,
Shirley Benell, Lakeside citizen and big fan of planning. And I just have a public comment of, I am not sure why we're all wasting our time going through these conditional use permits. And all this discussion over and over on the conditional use permits, when applicants of said conditional use permits are in violation of their existing conditional use permits, they should never even be allowed to apply for another conditional use permit. I mean, we don't see any compliance with existing conditional use permits. And then we give them another conditional use permit, which they clearly have issues complying with. You don't have code enforcement, and nothing seems to be done about the conditional use permits that are in violation. Feels like we're all spinning our wheels here. I hope that the commission would look at follow-up on the conditional use permits that they grant and find either compliance or quit issuing them, because you don't hold the people up to the conditions. Thank you.
you know how I feel about it, babe. Anything else? No? Very good comments,
I have one thing,
sure.
that all of this could be avoided. I'm Sharon Blanket.
Hi,
All of
Sharon.
this time, and it can all be avoided if there is an expiration date on in the decision. When you do your staff report, if you say this expires November 19th, 2023, then you've got it and then it's done. You could, I guess, get an extension at that point, but it would be harder to say, well, I had some problems or whatever, but we do positional, we do extensions all the time. For huge projects. And as far as not being able to do conditional use permits, it's your right under the law to apply for all of these permits. You cannot deny you that right.
Thank you, Sharon.
Anything else? All right, I will go ahead and close the planning commission meeting at 7:53.